Hey everybody, before I get started, I just want to mention a couple of ways that you can engage with me on a more personal level. I have a few avenues set up and I keep focusing on one, and I figured why don't I make a short little video talking about all of them real quick before we get into these episodes. So first thing, Patreon. There's a link in the episode description, in every episode description to the Patreon, as well as a video on the feed called Major Announcement that has all the details of what each tier offers and how much they cost. I implore you to check that out. I offer a lot of cool shit for my patrons. Second thing, the Discord channel. There's also a Discord link in the episode description and in every episode description. I have multiple channels set up there for each show that I'm covering, and it's a great way to just engage with me. I have a channel set up for MMA talk as well. I'm a big MMA fan, so if you're an MMA fan, you can check that out as well. There's a link to the Discord in the episode description. And then lastly, the Facebook and Twitter. Social media. Follow me on there. I post news on there. When I say news, I mean like, hey, I'm stopping covering this show. Hey, I'm starting covering this show. Let me know what you think about this. I do live watches of things on Facebook where like I'll check in and say I'm watching so-and-so show, and then I'll like live comment while I'm watching it, and that'll be cool if maybe you watch that show too and you want to watch along with me, or you're watching it later and you will see my thoughts, which are usually pretty entertaining because I'm usually pretty high when I'm writing them. So check out all those links in each episode description, and let's talk about this episode. Peace.
One mic, one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. One mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. One mic. One mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, and today I'm here to talk about Season 1, Episode 5 of HBO Silo, entitled The Janitor's Boy. The title here refers to the story that Common's character Sims tells his potential shadow Doug about the nature of working for Judicial through the lens of his experiences as the son of a supposed janitor. I really like this episode, man, like a lot. Like on a micro level, this was just a really entertaining and compelling episode of television. The whodunit aspect of the episode with Juliet searching for Martin's killer, that was great stuff. You know, uncovering the conspiracy, all the twists and turns along the way. I thought it was all just like really engrossing. But then on a macro level, I love how much this episode contributed to the overall big picture of what's going on in the silo, who's involved, their motivations, and what any of this had to do with Holston and George. So let's just dive right in, and I want to start where the episode picks up. Episode 4 ended with kind of a cliffhanger on whether or not Marnes was going to be killed or not, and we open this episode learning that Marnes was in fact killed. And we're also introduced to a small new mystery right away. Juliet's reading the file that Holston hid about George, but she doesn't find anything interesting in it, so why'd she hide it? I paused it to get a better look at what she was reading, and it read to me as if it was a transcript of an interview, presumably between Holston and George, where George is being asked about his relics, and he denies the involvement of anyone else, which Holston would have known at the time of Juliet's involvement. And of course, Juliet knows of her own involvement, but I still don't know why he would hide that. Jules gets Marnes gets called to Marnes' place to not investigate, but to be present at the scene as they've discovered Marnes' body. And Sims, Bernard, and Billings, who is Marnes' replacement, are already there. Juliet remarks out loud how quickly Marnes was replaced, almost seemingly tipping Sims to the fact that she's suspicious, because she's like, oh wow, Marnes' body is still here. Like, he basically still breathing, and you got his replacement right here. And I want to take this moment to briefly point out, I'm just really not a fan of Common as an actor. Like, his delivery, and I like him as a rapper, so I feel shitty about it, but like, his delivery is always very kind of like monotone and flat to me. And it's really noticeable in these scenes in Martin's apartment where he tries to like raise his voice or show emotion with Juliet. It kind of sounds like just someone reading emotional lines off of a sheet of paper for the first time. Like how you're practicing, like, let me practice my lines, and you're like reading the script. I don't find him terribly distracting, but I am surprised at how much acting work he gets. So they discuss how to handle the murder, and Bernard wants to create a story that, unbeknownst to him, is the actual reality. He wants to paint the picture of two longtime servants at the silo finding love at their old age and having that love cut short. And then this will also allow them to have a nice little 2-for-1 deal on a funeral as well. Common wants to do a forgiveness holiday or some shit, and Bernard says he wants to do Well, Bernard says that by the end of the episode, that he wants to do the forgiveness holiday, but that sounds lame as fuck to me. Bernard says that they can have a race. In the moment, Bernard says that they can have a race to the top, since John's always loved foot races. And of note in this scene is that Juliet notices a picture torn off the wall, and she finds a paper with the name Doris Kennedy circled on it, on Marnes' body. We also learn in this scene that Billings is a very by-the-book kind of guy. Not dirty, always does everything by the pact. And it makes me wonder, why do they want him to be sheriff so bad, since it seems like they wouldn't be able to corrupt or control him? But one of the many mysteries that I'm sure we'll get an answer to. I also like in this scene how Sim says he doesn't like the race idea. And then Bernard is just like, huh. And it was very much like I heard what you said, but I don't know why you still here not doing what the fuck I told you to do. Get the fuck out of my office. Like, whatever. Like, it was so dismissive with virtually no sound and no body movement. I thought Tim Robbins really crushed that. Like, he said a lot with that, huh, okay. Like, all right. That's what you think. It doesn't mean shit, but okay, I heard what you said. I thought such an effortless and hilarious dismissal of Sims was hilarious, but not quite as funny as Bernard's funeral speech, where he talks about this Excel sheet he made with all the residents under 46 years old and how Johns actually has small shoes to fill. Like, what a weird and awkward speech. But like Tim Robbins really crushed those two scenes. And in the funeral, we get a little bit more world building. We see them take a bite of fruit and toss it in the grave ritualistically. And I wonder if that's more of like a literal rebirth than Bernard said in his speech, or his speech was actually literal. Like, are they really gonna like essentially, like, are they throwing these fruits in here and they're gonna bury them and then water that area and grow trees or some shit that are like, hey, here's the Ruth Johns tree and here's the whatever the fuck his first name is, Marnes tree. Like, I'm no scientist. I don't know if that's possible, but like I was like, at first I thought like, oh, that's an interesting and weird kind of ritual. But then like he says something in his speech about a rebirth or something like that, and it just made me wonder, like, are they literally trying to like grow trees that are gonna be Ruth trees? I don't know. After the credits, because we hadn't gotten to the credits yet, the opening credits at this point, Sandy immediately gets in Juliet's face and gives her 17 more reasons to fire her when I would have only needed one. I would have, like, Sandy wouldn't have even been in this episode if I was Juliet, because she would have been fired last week. But Sandy comes in, she's like, everything goes through me. If you want a pencil, even that's got to go through me. And I'm just like, facts? Because, well, you fired then, and now I can remove the middleman between me and pencils. Get the fuck out. Like, I just don't understand how someone can have the gall to talk to their boss like that. Even if you don't like your boss, who the fuck are you to talk to them like that? I can't believe Juliet has not fired her just for being irritating as fuck. Like, I can't, like, if I was a boss or something and that was my first impression of someone who works for me, it's their last day. And Sandy is continuously coming in here and giving Juliet ample reasons to fire her, and I just don't understand why she doesn't. But seriously, Sandy wants to know who killed Marnes, and she doesn't want the patsy that she believes that Judicial is going to serve up in order to maintain order. She wants to know who actually killed Marnes. So Juliet leaves the office, and Sandy's like, where are you going? And Juliet's like, I'm going to go find who killed Marnes. And I was kind of taken aback by this, like in a good way, with how the show moves. Like, you know, when I've talked about Yellow Jackets this season, one of my biggest issues is how slow it's moving and how bloated the episodes are. So for a character in universe to be like, wait, you're already going to do what I asked you to do in the last scene? It was like really cool. Like, it felt kind of meta almost. Like, she's like, wait, where are you going? He's like, and Julia's like, you just asked me to look into Mars. That's where I'm going. I'm like, damn. Like, I like that. This shit's moving, man. It's not wasting any time, and I love it. So Billings joins Juliet on her quest to find out what happened to Marnes, and the first guy they visit turns out to be a total waste of time for them, but he does introduce a new question for us, a new mystery. Juliet notices the guy's hand shaking, and she says that he couldn't, after they leave from talking to him, she tells Billings that he couldn't have killed Marnes because he's got the syndrome. I wrote down in my notes, ooh, the syndrome, that sounds cool. What's that, and how terminal is it? So, like, I want to know what's the syndrome? How do you get it? What are its symptoms? All that good stuff. So, I mentioned earlier that Juliet found a paper with the name Doris Kennedy on it. She ditches Billings, who then secretly heads to talk to Sims, and she heads to Patrick Kennedy's place. Now, this is the point at which I thought the show really kicked into overdrive with just how good the storytelling was here. So if you recall from last week, they visited Patrick Kennedy because Marnes was under the impression that Ruth's killer was after him. When they visited him, they asked him about his wife, and he said there was 2 reasons it was dumb to ask about his wife, and one of them was that she was dead, and we never heard the second. So when Jules ditches Billings, she heads over to what she and we all believe to be Patrick's house, and he's not there. She breaks in, and she finds rat poison and a picture of Ruth that was torn off Marnes' wall, the one that she noticed was missing in the beginning. As she leaves, a guy passes her on the street, and he asks who she's looking for, and she says Patrick Kennedy. And he's like, he ain't here, and the scene ends. And I wrote in my notes, I'm like, that was a quick 3-sentence scene that seemed entirely irrelevant. What was the point of that scene? So the planted rat poison and picture indicates to Juliet and us that Patrick is the person who's being set up as the patsy to take the fall for the murders. Meanwhile, Billings believes he's found out from Sims who the killer actually is, a guy named Ralph Melby. My notes then said, who the fuck is Ralph Melby? Of note here is that we learn about the Friends of the Silo, which is a very nice pseudonym for informant-ass snitch. Anyway, Juliet pieces together that Melby is a distraction and a means to make her look incompetent. So she requests an arrest warrant for Patrick and not Ralph Melby. This triggers Judicial to send Doug's goofy ass, Common's potential shadow, to try to arrest Patrick before Juliet can. And Juliet arrives at the place that we thought was Patrick's home and finds Doug there, but then reveals that Patrick has been moved and Doug planted the evidence in the wrong house. And this told me that that must have been the purpose of the 3-sentence scene that I didn't get the meaning of at the time. That the guy told Juliet that Patrick didn't live there anymore. And I just thought this was a great scene that could easily have been missed, but speaks to just how brilliantly this show is written. Like, I left that scene, like, why was that there? That felt irrelevant, and then it ended up having big relevance later. Also, I don't know if I necessarily need to know why Patrick was chosen as the patsy. It could just be something as simple as, like, he had beef with Marnes, so he'd be a good fit. But I feel like there's more to it, and I'm interested to find out what that is, if there is. So a chase ensues down the silo with Juliet chasing Doug at the same time as the race up the silo is beginning. There's a really cool shot that I love here of the camera. It's like panning down the spiral staircase that Juliet and Doug are running down, and it's outside of the staircase and it's panning down. And as it's moving down, you see them going down the spiral, and it keeps moving down past them, and then you start seeing the runners coming up. I thought that was a really cool shot. And the race causes Juliet and Doug to collide. I said decline almost. To collide. And Doug almost kills Juliet until she's saved by one of the other runners. And then finally, the episode concludes with Sims telling Doug the story about which the episode is named. Doug has now fucked up twice, both with George, which is new information that lets us know that Doug is the person who killed George and that it was most likely at Common's behest, and that he fucked up with Patrick as well. I'd also say, did he fuck up with George? Like, it's not his fault that Juliet was suspicious of it being a suicide. Like, I don't think Doug fucked that up. But anyway, Sims asks him if he still has the note, and he says yeah, and gives it to him. And we don't know what that means at the time. And Common says, maybe we could still make this work. I have to figure it out. And he gives the note back to Doug. Common then tells him the story of this place that Doug found him at. Looked to be a janitor's closet, but apparently it's a secret hideout for Judicial, or at least the start of a path toward something secret involving Judicial. I personally wonder if it's like a janitor's closet and then you move a shelf and there's like an elevator behind it, since we learned that lifts and pulleys aren't allowed by the pact. Like, I wonder if there's like a lift or a pulley or an elevator that is hidden in that room, and then maybe even it leads out of the silo. I don't know. But his father was a supposed janitor and ate a lot of shit for that. But when Sims had an issue with a bully, his dad got the bully relocated, and long story short, eventually brought Sims into the Judicial world via that janitor's closet. And Common pointlessly pretends to make Doug his shadow before he pushes him over the edge of the stairway to his death. We later find out that the note Sims mentioned was actually a suicide note, which was, the note that he gave back to Doug, and this was found on Doug's body and not Patrick's. It was originally meant for Patrick. It worked very well for Doug, which Juliet points out. But very nice audible by Common here. Judge Meadows I'm assuming this is Judge Meadows. This is the first time we've seen her, and they don't say her name, but this has to be Judge Meadows. She doesn't buy that a guy from Judicial like Doug would kill the mayor in Marnes. But then she also tells Juliet to not look into it further after a very obvious and telling look at Common. Like, she looks at him like, she getting real too close to figuring out what the fuck we up to. Don't worry about it. Like, just let it go. It's fine. We got the killer. Don't worry about it. And that essentially wraps up our little one episode whodunit mystery. There's a couple more things to go over real quick, but I just want to point out how I thought they did so much in about 50 minutes. Like, we got a story with twists and turns, new questions to ask, some questions answered. Like, this episode didn't even take a break. Every scene was meaningful. It's just a really well done show, man. So a couple closing thoughts. Was Billings manipulated into telling Juliet about Ralph Melby, or was he involved? Like, did he know? Like, I don't know. Like, they're showing him as somebody who's, like, very loyal to the pact and a very by-the-books kind of guy, but I don't know that for sure. At the end of the episode, Juliet finds that that one guy in the cafeteria, Lucas, and he basically points out, like, stars and planet rotation and constellations. And it makes sense to me that they wouldn't know what stars are, but it makes me wonder again about the screen itself. Like, if what they see isn't real, which I think we all can agree we probably feel it's not, why randomly interject stars and rotations and constellations into it? They don't know what that is, so they're not gonna buy into the authenticity of the screen because they see stars, because they don't know what the fuck stars are. So, like, that felt weird. But then if the screen is real and he's really seeing stars and constellations and planet rotation, what planet are they on? And then also, what actually happened to Holston and his wife? Like, did they actually go out there and die? Like, so, like, is the screen real or not? And if it is, why did they... If it is, what happened to Holston and his wife? And if not, why are they putting stars in there where people don't know what the fuck stars are? Still waiting on the true significance of the camcorder. We learned that it's a relic that could get you way more than a slap on the wrist, but I'm just really excited to find out what's on it. So that's all I got for this week. I will see you guys next week for episode 6, and until then, peace.